Hello everybody. So let's start with this quick tutorial, but it's a very important step on your Figma journey. Uh, Probably you already know how to do that, because if you're already jumping into tutorials on YouTube or Instagram, you may know already how to do it. But it's very important to follow a few steps before creating components. Okay, I will show you a few important things that is important to have in your mind and how to organize them correctly in your file, because we're gonna use the same file through the other lessons and we need to reuse them through the time. So it's really important that you follow the steps on this first tutorial, and after that we are going to start linking the same idea after that. Okay, so feel free to open your Figma if you want to follow me. I just created an empty file, and from now I will start creating some components. So let's start creating a very simple component here. I will pretty much click here and I will just create a simple shape, rectangle shape here. Okay, so probably you already know that if you select here, it's gonna pop up this symbol here that is like the 4 diamond shapes. That is important. So you have these 4 diamond shapes that they are gonna be important for you. So once you click, you can pretty much just click here or use the option Command K to create your component. I personally don't like using shortcuts, especially for creating components. If I could even disable this option, I will do that. The only thing is because people create a lot of mistakes because of the shortcuts, so they don't think and they just press the shortcut and they start creating problems on the design system in the future. So my recommendation will be to do very manually, very slowly, like me. Okay, I do slow things because I'm pretty old, so I need to do in a very slow pace. Okay, so I have this one and I will click here to create my first component, right? Okay, once you have your first component, the name of the layer pretty much is the name of the component right now. And you can see the component here on your asset panel on the top, right? So if you see here, the rectangle one was created. If you prefer to have a list, you can just switch the view here. I like to sometimes have as a list because it's easier to read the name of the component. Okay. Of course, this is not a very good name convention, and this will vary a lot, of course, because in the future you're gonna try to adapt the name in a way that will be easier to other people, designers and developers, to use the same component. Okay, but in our example, you're gonna ask me, Juno, but what exactly is component? What is the power of component, right? And that's the very funny thing, because pretty much we are bringing the same concept from coding to design. So you have to thank you the developers, because they created Figma as a tool to make sure that we can, design inside specific constraints, right? So we don't do crazy stuff, or or we don't give a lot of freedoms to designers, because otherwise we will take much more time to code and understand how to transform that design into coding. And one thing that is very interesting is because you're gonna notice that there's a couple of things that you're gonna ask me in some point, but Juno, I don't see the value of building those components, but I will explain this in a few minutes. Okay, so once you have that, I made a list here from Game of Thrones families, okay? Because I'm not super fan, but I know that it's very popular. I don't even know exactly who is who now, like who the character killed this character, they married together, whatever. I don't even remember those things. But I will pretty much just create the Stark family, okay? So this is the Stark family, okay? And I will create another family. So let's use the ellipse here. If you want to change the color, of course, just click here because you just want to bring a little bit more personality to the family. So this one will be another component. So you already know how to do that. Pretty much you have to just come here, okay, and create a component. So this created the ellipse 1 because we use the ellipse tool, but we are gonna change this to the Lannister family, okay? We have the Stark family and we have the Lannister family. Maybe you don't like the color of the Stark family, so you can just select here the rectangle. You just open here and you see the rectangle, and maybe you can change the color. Okay, so we have like two different families. Okay, and let's create one extra family. I will use the star. So the star, you can just use the shift tool if you prefer to just drag, and this is gonna help you to adjust the size of your star. But also you have like some specific tools for the star. So if you want to have like maybe like more points, and also if you prefer, you can just zoom in here and you can just adjust like that. Okay, and this one, let's change the color for another one, and this one we can save also as a component, and this will be the Targaryen family. Okay, in this case we have 3 different families here. All right, so having that, we have a couple of things before. Once you have all these 3 families, we can go to assets and we can see them, right? Okay, if you want to reuse the components that we have, you can just go to the assets, and for the Stark family, I can just bring that here, okay? As much as I want in the future. So that's the power of components, because instead of creating the same object over and over again, I can just create one, and whenever I need to change that component, I pretty much just go and change on this main component. Okay, so there's one important thing that that I like to mention usually, because even Figma, they related to this one with the 4 fillet diamonds, right? And this is important to remember in the future, because you're gonna see the 4 fillet diamonds here. They are the master component or the main component. I don't like to use also the master component name, because even like in code, Microsoft changed that after the Black Lives Matters like a movement, because it's very funny, because the world that we live sometimes is a little bit crazy, and everybody was like using code repository using master, and you have like the other instances that is connected to the master, right? But related to like the slavery like a mindset. So Microsoft changed it on even on GitHub settings to push everybody to use main instead of master. And also like I think it's good that we use that. I know that some designers, they use the word master, but I think it will be nice to start switching us also to main component, or if you prefer, just to use mother component. I like to use the concept of mother component, because one mother can have a lot of children, right? One mother can have a lot of kids. So, which means that the mother can have as much as she wants, right? So let's say that the Lannister mother just selected to have 2 kids, but the Targaryen family, maybe they want to have more kids, right? So you can just bring like that. Okay, so once you bring all these components, also there's another detail. In the future, what you could do is selecting here the main component, and you can just use the option, holding the option, and this will duplicate the component for you. So if you see now on the layer panel here, you will notice that the Stark main component, it's the 4 diamonds fillet, and all the kids here, right, they have a outline diamond only, right? They are not fillet. So you can identify in the future that all the outlines diamonds, they are like a children from a main component or from a mother, okay? In this case, if you want to like duplicate more Targaryens, you can do it, and you will have a lot of like a different children's like that. Okay, so what's the power of the components? Once you have this one, let's say that I want to change the color. Let's say you are working a project and someone decided that the button should be another color, right? So it's not going to be like a red, should be, I don't know, should be green, should be whatever color that they may need. Okay, so if you want to change, if it's like a more green, whatever, you just need to change in only one component, and this will change in several screens automatically for you. So think about that. In the future, whenever you have to work, imagine if you have like hundreds and hundreds of screens, that this potentially will happen. If you don't have this really well organized and connected, probably you're going to spend hours and hours trying to replace and fixing the design. Okay, I like to joke that if you are not going to use the components, you can just use Photoshop, you can use Illustrator, you can use even Paintbrush, because if you don't care about that, you're gonna do everything manually, and you don't want to do manually everything here, because it's gonna cost you a lot of time, and time is money, right? Okay, so having that in your mind, children's, right, they can have their own names. So this is very confusing sometimes, because if you have the Stark family, let's say this is the Stark, but instead of Stark, I can use Edo, right? Is one of the, is one of the family members of the Stark family. This one will be Caitlyn. This is everything that I brought from Game of Thrones. Okay, I'm not sure if it's wrong, but I was just googling that. You have Sansa. I remember Sansa. This name. In Arya, I remember this name also. Okay, so you have all of them here, right? And they can have different name, but if you change the main name here, so you see that on your assets you don't see the children, you just see the main component. But if you change the name of the main component here, let's say that you want to change that for whatever, right, like a Silva family. Okay, so everything will change to Silva family. Okay, the kids right now, they are not gonna change because they are already like we already renamed them, but they are linked to the Silva family right now. Okay, so let's go back and just rename back to Stark family. Okay, so have this in mind, that if you rename the main component, we'll rename everything. Okay, there's one detail that in the future you may ask me about that, because you're gonna ask, but you know, I have a problem here, because the problem is, let's say that you have Rob here, and Rob, maybe he has his own personality, right? Because every kid here, they can have their own personality, and they just came here, and Rob decided to change it a little bit the color, right? And that's it. And it's gonna come back to the mom and say, hey mom, I made a tattoo, right? Because I changed my color. I prefer, I have my own personality, because I'm a grown person, an adult. I know, I feel, usually it's gonna be a teenager, okay, saying that. But anyways, I feel that I wanna change my color. Okay, you can do that. But the only thing is, because in the future, if you may need to change the color, the rebel child is not gonna follow the family anymore, because we did a change right here. So a lot of people ask me, okay, Juno, but if I can change the component child, what is the main thing about building components, right? So this is a very interesting question, because we follow the same structure of coding. And in coding, what happens is, if you have like a component, you can edit the object that you have inline, right? Like if you want to make a specific change, you can change only that object. There's like a specific circumstance that they may need that to do that, but it's not a good practice at all, right? So usually developers will try to stick to the main component to make sure that if they need to reuse the same component over time, there's no change on that level, right? So everything is connected to the main component. Okay, so you may have people doing mistakes on the design. Usually like new designers, if they are like starting understanding this concept, they may change a lot of like those components. And an easy way to reset instead of coming here, duplicating whatever, is just coming here and reset all changes, okay? But there's one detail, because Rob right now, if I reset all the changes, is gonna even rename back to the Stark name, okay? So if you reset, you're resetting all the changes on that instance, okay? So make sure that if you reset, if you need to rename, just go and rename again, okay? Cool. So this is like the most important thing. Later on, we're gonna talk about different type of components, because you may need to create components a little bit more complex in the future. We are gonna touch on that in a little bit, because I will do another video just talking about that, because it's a little bit more complex topic. But the most important thing is that you understand that you can create components, and you can have the main component, and you have the childs, and you could potentially edit the childs if you want, okay? So one thing that is important to organize components. First, rename everything. So even here, page 1 is not a good way to keep the name of this page. So I will just use Adam here, if you want to use the same one, and components. I will just rename as a components this first page that we have, okay? And maybe another one that I like to have like is this random icon, but a slider, but it's gonna be the sandbox, okay? I like to have the sandbox here on the top, because whatever I create, sometimes I need to test. And also in coding, developers use sandbox, right, to run small tests to check. So I like to use the same concept on the design side, and you can just run that here. Okay, so renaming everything. After that, let's do one thing that is really important now, is how you're gonna organize, because pretty much you have everything here, right? All these components, but a lot of people, they prefer to organize in different ways. So that's why about Figma files in the community, right? If you go to Figma community, you're gonna find a lot of different files, a lot of different ways that people organize things, and sometimes I will say it's not the best. So that's the thing about understanding once you open a file. So some people, they like to use frames. So they just come here. You can just use like a presentation size or whatever size that you like, or you can just drag here, right? And create a frame. Okay, so once you drag into the frame, you have here frame, right? We can even rename as my component document. Okay, so just to remember. Okay, some people like to organize in a beautiful documentation, and they just drag that here, right? The main components, because I created all that. But what is the problem of doing that? It's I understand that you organize that and it's easier to drag and everything, and you can see here that the ones that I drag is the main component because of the 4 small diamonds. But if I drag a child here, visually you cannot tell me right now who is the main component, only if you check here, right? You have to see layer by layer. So that's why I don't like to use frames to organize components. I will say it's not a good idea, okay? Because later on, if someone needs, it's gonna be really hard to find visually. So once you do that, if you go to your asset panel, you're gonna see that you have your local components, and also you have an extra folder now that was created because of this, right? You see, it was created because you dragged the components inside this frame, okay? This is like the way that Figma created. I understand, because the frame is supposed to be something that you have to use to design, not to save documentation, okay? So I never use the Figma frames to organize my documentation, okay? So I will never recommend that. So another way that if you need to organize a lot of components, you can use here on the top the sections. So the sections, I can agree that will be better, that if you can drag here, you try to bring the components inside the sections, okay? Because inside the sections, you can still visualize that this is the main component and this is a child component, right? And if you need to drag everything, they are gonna be inside the sections that you can just add, I don't know, buttons, right? So you can save like that, and all the buttons, they are gonna be inside this. So this is the way that I will recommend you to save and not by frames. So I will even delete that because I won't recommend you to do that, okay? You can organize based on different type of components, but I use that, especially in a more complex design system, to create like a small version control. Because for example, let's say that the company is like a switching like the design style from one style to another, and that they want to build little by little the components. So what happened, and I can give an example. So I prefer to use like a version 1 like that, and version 2, let's say. Okay, so you have 2 different versions, and you have just components on the version 1. So this will be helpful because let's say that we're gonna build a new rectangle, right? Very simple. And this new rectangle also, it's linked to the Stark family, okay? And now let's say everything is getting like more into the gradients, right? So we can just like do like a random gradient quickly here. But let's say that the idea is like using more gradients from now. Okay, it's not a problem. Okay, so I will drag here, and of course, because I just created this one, I will just create a component, but it's not rectangle 2, it's the Stark family. Okay, so the good thing about having sections is because even if you have the same name, because of the folder structure, it's gonna be easier to you to find that. Okay, it doesn't mean that you cannot have the same Stark here. You could have that because Figma, behind the scenes, each one of those components, they have different IDs. So you could do that, but it's gonna be pretty confusing for people and can create some conflicts in very advanced design systems, okay? Because it's gonna be a little bit confusing to remember everything. So this is the way that I will recommend you to organize your design system, okay? And your components. So that's good, having all these like sections. And another thing that is important to mention, that's why it's important to have those things organized like that. It's important because in the future, the childs, if you need to prototype here on the top, they need to have a unique name. So if they have the same name, this may create problems for you in the future. Okay, so the Targaryen and Lannister families here, we still need to rename them. Okay, so I will just make sure that you can move them and make sure that they have a unique name. So one useful tool, if you need to rename things quickly, but you're not very creative, is like selecting everything, right? So don't be lazy and don't select things like in the half, because in the future, if you have a lot of objects inside, this will create problems for you, okay? So don't be lazy. It's just like a few inches, centimeters. I don't know in inches, okay? Sorry, because I have my mindset in centimeters. So, or in pixels, whatever. But it's just a little bit, right? Don't be so lazy. Okay, so once you select, you can just right click and go to rename here, or you can just press Command R. So I will just select Command R, and this will prompt this modal window. So I can select the current name, that is the Targaryen, and I will use a space, and you can use number up or down depending how you organize it and arrange it, your components. But let's use number up. So it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once you rename, everything will be renamed and they will have unique names. Okay, so this will be important in the future. Cool. Okay, so another thing that is important to remember about components is not only the sections, but also one simple thing that is something from like a basic computer, right? Every computer, Windows or Mac OS, they will have the same structure of folders, and you can use the same structure of folders here, okay? So let's say that you want to create other components, and in this case, let's say I will create some extra rectangles, okay? So let me just create some other rectangles here, and I will just change the color here also for those ones. And I want to create components, right? So you have like two rectangles and you have the main component here, but I will select the both. And you notice that now the icon to create components is a drop down, right? So you can click here or you can click on the drop down. Actually, the interface is really bad, right? Like for some people, it's really small, but you can just click on the drop down. So you have the create component. But if you click here, you're going to create a big component with the two rectangles. It's not what exactly I want to do. I want to use the second option, that is the multiple components, because I want to create individual components. And the component set, we're going to talk about this in another video because it will be very complex. So let's say that you want to use this shortcut. You can create multiple components, okay? And pretty much you will have another two different rectangles, okay? Okay, so let's rename those rectangles. I will just use the random names from Game of Thrones. There's like a Tyrion, okay. And all of them, they are rectangles, okay? So having that in mind, or let's say that, okay, let's go back to the Stark family. I found here the Stark family, and you have the Caitlyn, okay? So this is from Stark family, but I don't want to keep this as a Stark family. I want to just use a space, backslash, and you can use this as a Rob, okay? So what happened here is because we are going to try to combine everything in the same family. So the Eddard is going to be on the Stark. I think it's this name, right? Eddard. Very weird. Okay. Eddard. Stark backslash Caitlyn. One question that you may have. Do you need to add a space? No, you don't need. You just can just have like a without space like this. But it's not super readable. So that's why I add a space here to make it readable. And if you go to your assets now, you're gonna see that inside the version 1, you have now the Stark folder, and you have all the 3 family members right there. Okay, cool. So they don't have the slash on the name, but this just explain to Figma that we wanna create a new folder with those components, okay? So this can go for the Targaryen family too, okay? So if you want to create some extra stars, in this case you could just even create different sizes and different shapes, right, of the stars. You can just add some extra shapes like this. I will just change the colors a little bit. And this one, okay, I think will be good enough for the test. You already know how to create multiple components, so use the drop down. If you click by mistake here, Command Z pretty much, and create multiple components like that. Okay, Targaryen family, let me see the names they have, is very complex. So I will just copy the Targaryen here. So you have the Targaryen family member 1 is Aegon. Okay, the second member will be, let me copy this one, it's gonna be the Viserys. Okay, if you're a big fan of Game of Thrones, I'm sorry, okay? And I am on. So you can fix me that. how to pronounce correctly those names. Very weird to me, at least. Okay, so you have the same concept right here. Okay, just to conclude now, we're gonna use this Lannister, and you can duplicate the Lannister if you want. Because if you want to have like a exactly copy of that, it's fine. But as you know, this is a child, right? From this one. But you can just right click and you can use this tool that is the detach instance, which is very good when you are doing that. But if you are designing, avoid detaching instance all the time, because if you do that, your design system, they're not going to be connected, and you're just pretty much unlinking this child from the mother. So I will just do that because I want to have an exact copy of that one. Instead of building a circle 149, 149, you can just come here and just do that and just change the color for whatever color you want. Okay, so if I duplicate, of course, this one is not a component, so they're gonna create just another frame. Okay, but I can do one more time here, and I will go here and detach and change the color. Okay, so if you go here, you change the color for whatever you want. Okay, so let's select both of them, carefully select create multiple components, and from the Lannister family you can just go here, backslash Cersei Lannister, you have Jaime, okay, and you have here the Tyrion, okay, good. Oh, sorry, I forgot the backslash. Good. So we have all this version 1 here with all the families in different folders. Okay, so this will be useful. Okay, to complete that part, now, as you know, we can have the child of those ones, right? So let's say that I bring Cersei and Jaime here, and we have like these two different childs, right? You can see here they are childs, and maybe you want to bring like the Caitlyn and Aemon. Okay, so you can just have all the different ones. And what happening in life? What happened, right? You have the mom, right? The mom, they have kids, right? The kids go to parties and they go crazy, as you know. And after going crazy, what they do? They make kids, right? They make new families. Okay, so you can have, for example, two different instances here from those main components and select both of the items like that from different families, and you can just create a component. You don't need to click on the drop down. You just click here, boom, and you create a component. So the nested components, they're gonna be something that we are gonna use a lot in the future, okay? And they're gonna be super useful for a lot of different things. So if you never watched the movie Inception, I will recommend you to do that, because they're gonna be very interesting, you know, to understand the level that you are. You're gonna be lost sometimes, but it's all good. Okay, so this one, for example, could be a new family, totally new family, okay? And will be the Silva family. Very simple name, very Brazilian name or Portuguese name. Okay, you have the Silva family, and the Silva family will be now on version 1, right? Because we're using components from version 1. So let me just move this here, okay? And they are like the combination of like two different components. So if I need to change this component, they're gonna reflect in all those other components, right? So if I have to change this one, this color is gonna change all the colors also. And even if you change maybe the shape, right, of the rectangle, if you use like the rounded corners like a 24, they're gonna reflect also on the child ones. So this will be super useful in the future for us. So just make sure that you can understand and practice a little bit. So those one also, if you wanna combine them, in this case, let's say you can even like a resize in the future, whatever you want. And if you wanna combine them, create a component, you have a new component here, and quarter. Okay, so you have another component here, and those components, by the way, they can be reusable, and they can potentially also combine two other like a components. So that's why it's going to be one component over and over again. Okay, so you're going to do those combinations more and more in the future. Okay, so I think this will be a really good starting point to understand. I will ask you to build a few components. Just try to build something like that. 3 different families, each family with like a few members, and with those members you try to combine them together, and once you combine them together you can just have that, okay, those combination. So one last thing, I know that is like all the time one last thing, I forgot about like a couple of things, but it's important. It's about maybe let's say that you have the silver component here. You don't want to give access to those components to people, okay? So in order to do that, there's like 2 different ways to do that. One is pretty much adding here a dot in the front or a underscore, okay? I use dot usually, and if I use dot, I use another keyword in the front to make sure that it's gonna be in another folder. But pretty much if you just use a dot, it's gonna hide those components from the Targaryen, right? So you have like the Targaryen here, but you pretty much, you can see that they are not available anymore here for people, right? Even the Stark family, if you see, they're not available anymore, right? Okay, so they're gonna be hidden for you in the future. So for now, they created another folder with the dot, but in order to hide, you have to publish your library. If you don't publish, it's not gonna hide. It's gonna show all the components. So let me just publish all the components. You have to go here, okay, on the little team library, and you see that they created a hidden folder here by the end with the version 1, and you have the Stark and the and you have the Stark and the Targaryen family right here, okay? So I just move it myself a little bit here to show you. Okay, good. So keep this in your mind that you may need to hide some of those components in the future because you don't want to give access to those components, only to this one, okay? Because you created like a small detail that you're going to use inside, but people shouldn't be using this small detail alone. So you just make sure that the only combination that people will have access in the future is this component only. Okay, cool. I hope you enjoy this component session that we just did with like a lot of like a small concepts together, and try, build some families, and I will be super happy to in our next group session to review all together and give you extra tips if you may need. Okay, so thank you for watching and feel free to share with other people. Bye.